Why, hello there. This is Let's Talk About Myths, baby, and I am your host, Liv, here with another reading of The Fall of Troy. We are getting up there, but last week I said the horse was coming up, and it turns out I lied. It's like 4 books away. But the books are shorter now, so we will get through possibly both 9 and 10 today. We're gonna see how it goes. Also, I just completely forgot, there's at least one person they have to go get again, like Neoptolemus. We've got to go get Philoctetes. That's going to be a whole thing. So, I don't even remember if I've covered Philoctetes on the podcast, but he's got a story. There's also a play that one of these days I will cover, and yes, he is part of the inspiration behind Phil of Disney's Hercules, but definitely not the same. No Danny DeVito vibes here. Don't get excited. Honestly, as I said last week, I'm recording a ton of stuff ahead of time right now, which means I find I'm left with less to say in these openings purely because I'm just recording them back to back. So let's dive right in because there's a lot still to cover. Remember last we left off, Troy had officially been helped by Zeus, actually. Things were getting so bad that Zeus stepped in. Because Ganymede, who was up there with Zeus because there's a whole story there. We won't get into it. Anyway, Ganymede is from Troy, but he lives up on Mount Olympus with Zeus, and he saw what was happening, and he called in a favor. And so Troy was shrouded by this kind of invisible cloud. I don't know. Basically, they couldn't go to Troy. The Greeks had to back off, and everyone gets at least a little bit of time to rest after, especially Troy. They had Eurypylus. They had him killed. That was their latest hero, and once again, they lost. Poor Troy, honestly. Neoptolemus we don't want to see him win. And as you heard in that episode I released instead of a reading because I got so excited, Odysseus, there's not a lot he's got going for him either, despite still being my main man. Let's not be crazy. So we're going to return to the very end of the Trojan War, where things are not looking good for Troy, but they are still hanging in there as best they can. I'm going to try not to think of any of the connections to be made to the modern world, because it's easier that way right now. Especially as I record things ahead of time, and I'm horrified to imagine what things will be like in a month when this airs. Sorry to bring it down. Let's dive right back into this fictional, mythological war that is literally, let's remember, all about how bad war is. It's not about glory. This is Quintus Smyrnaeus' The Fall of Troy, Book 9, and part of 10, translated by A.S. Way. When ended was night's darkness, and the dawn rose from the world's verge, and the wide air glowed with splendor, then did Argos' warrior sons gaze over the plain, and lo, all cloudless clear stood Ilium's towers. The marvel of yesterday seemed a strange dream. No thought the Trojans had of standing forth to fight without the wall. A great fear held them thralls, the awful thought that yet alive was Peleus' glorious son. But to the king of heaven Antenor cried, Zeus, lord of Ida and the starry sky, hearken my prayer. O turn back from our town that battle-eager, murderous-hearted man. be he Achilles, who has not passed down to Hades or some other like to him. For now in heaven descended Priam's burge by thousands are her people perishing. No respite comes from calamity. Murder and havoc evermore increase. O Father Zeus, you care not, though we be slaughtered of our foes. You help them, forgetting your son, godlike Dardanus. But if this be the purpose of your heart, that Argives shall destroy us wretchedly, now do it. Draw not out our agony. In passionate prayer he cried, and Zeus from heaven hearkened, and hasted on the end of all, which else he had delayed. He granted him this awful boon, that myriads of Troy's sons should with their children perish. But that prayer he granted not, to turn Achilles' son back from the wide-wayed town. No, all the more he enkindled him to war, for he would now give grace and glory to the Nereid queen. So proposed he of all the gods mightiest. But now between the city and the Hellespont were Greeks and Trojans, burning men and steeds in battle slain, while paused the murderous strife. For Priam sent his herald Menetes forth to Agamemnon and the Achaean chiefs, asking a truce wherein to burn the dead, and they, of reverence for the slain, gave ear, for wrath pursues not the dead. And when they had lain their slain on those close thronging pyres, then did the Argives to their tents return, and unto Priam's gold abounding halls the Trojans, for Eurypylus sorrowing sore, for even as Priam's sons they honored him. Therefore apart from all the other slain, before the gate Dardanian, where the streams of eddying Xanthus down from Ida flow, fed by the rains of heavens, they buried him. Aweless Achilles' son the while went forth to his father's huge tomb. Outpouring tears he kissed the tall memorial pillar of the dead, and groaning clasped it round, and thus he cried, Hail, Father, though beneath the earth you lie in Hades' halls, I shall forget you not. Oh, to have met you living amid the host! Then of each other had our souls had joy, then of her wealth had we spoiled Ilium. But now you have not seen your child, nor I seen you, you who yearned to look on you in life. Yet, though you be afar amidst the dead, your spear, your son, have made your foes to quail, and Danaans with exceeding joy behold one like to you in stature, fame, and deeds. He spoke and wiped the hot tears from his face, and to his father's ships passed swiftly thence. With him went Myrmidon warriors 210, and white-haired Phoenix followed on with these, woefully sighing for the glorious dead. Night rose over earth, the stars flashed out in heaven, so these brake bread and slept till woke the dawn. Then the Greeks donned their armor, flashed afar its splendor up to the very firmament. Forth of their gates in one great throng they poured, like snowflakes thick and fast, which drift down heavily from the clouds in winter's cold. So streamed they forth before the wall, and rose their dread shout, groaned the deep earth beneath their tramp. The Trojans heard that shout and saw that host and marveled. Crushed with fear were all their hearts foreboding doom, for like a huge cloud seemed that throng of foes. With clashing arms they came, volumed and vast, the dust rose beneath their feet. Then either did some god with hardihood thrill Deiphobus' heart and make it void of fear, or his own spirit spurred him on to fight, to drive by thrust of spear that terrible host of foemen from the city of his birth. So there in Troy he cried with heartening speech, "O friends, be stout of heart to play to the men. Remember all the agonies that war brings in the end to them that yield to foes. You wrestle not for Alexander or alone, nor Helen, but for home, for your lives, for wives, for little ones, for parents gray, for all the grace of life, for all you have, for this dear land. Oh, may she shroud me over slain in the battle, ere I see her lie beneath foemen's spears. My country, I know not a bitterer pang than this for hapless men. Oh, be you strong for battle, forth to the fight with me, and thrust this horror from afar. Think not Achilles lives still to war against us. Him the ravaging fire consumed. Some other Achaean was it who so late enkindled them to war. Oh, shame it were if men who fight for fatherland should fear Achilles' self, or any Greek beside. Let us not flinch from war toil. Have we not endured much battle labor before now? What, know you not that to men sorely tried prosperity and joyance follow toil? So after scourging winds and ruining storms, Zeus brings to men a morn of balmy air. After disease, new strength comes. After war, peace. All things know time's changeless law of change. Then, eager for war, they armed themselves in haste. All through the town rang clangor of arms, as for grim fight strong men arrayed their limbs. Here stood a wife, shuddering with dread of war, yet piling, as she wept, her husband's arms before his feet. There little children brought to a father his war gear with eager haste, and now his heart was wrung to hear their sobs, and now he smiled on those small ministers, and stronger waxed his heart's resolve to fight to the last gasp for these, the near and dear. Yonder again, with hands that had not lost old cunning, a grey father for the fray girded a son, and murmured once and again, "Dear boy, yield you to no man in the war," and showed his son the old scars on his breast, proud memories of fights fought long ago. So when they all stood mailed in battle gear, forth of the gates they poured, all eager-souled for war. Against the chariots of the Greeks their chariots charged. Their ranks of footmen pressed to meet the footmen of the foe. The earth rang to the tramp of onset, pealed the cheer from man to man, swift closed the fronts of war. Loud clashed their arms all round, from either side war cries were mingled in one awful roar. Swift-winged full many a dart and arrow flew from host to host. Loud clanged the smitten shields beneath thrusting spears. Beneath javelin point and sword, men hewed with battle-axes lightening down. Crimson the armor ran with blood of men. And all this while Troy's wives and daughters watched from high walls that grim battle of the strong. All trembled as they prayed for husbands, sons, and brothers. White-haired fathers amidst them sat and gazed, while anguished fear for sons devoured their hearts. But Helen in her bower abode amidst her maids, there held by utter shame. So without pause before the wall they fought, while death exulted over them. Deadly strife shrieked out a long wild cry from host to host. With blood of slain men dust became red mire. Here, there, fast fell the warriors amid the fray. Then slew Deiphobus, the charioteer of Nestor, Hippasus' son. From that high car down fell he amidst the dead. Fear seized his lord, lest, while his hands were cumbered with the reins, he too by Priam's strong son might be slain. Melanthius marked his plight, swiftly sprang upon the car. He urged the horses on, shaking the reins, goading them with his spear, seeing the scourge was lost. But Priam's son left these and plunged amid the throng of foes. Thereupon many he brought the day of doom, for like a ruining tempest on he stormed through reeling ranks. His mighty hand struck down foes numberless. The plain was heaped with dead. As when a woodman on the long-ridged hills plunges amid the forest depths and hews with might and main and fells sap-laden trees to make him store of charcoal from the heaps of billets over-turfed and set afire, the trunks on all sides fallen, strewn the slopes, while over his work the man exults. So before Deiphobus' swift death-dealing hands in heaps the Achaeans each on each other fell. The charging lines of Troy swept over some fled to Xanthus' stream. Deiphobus chased into the flood yet more, and slew. As when on fish abounding Hellespont's strand the fishermen, hard straining, drag a net forth the depths to land, but while it trails yet through the sea one leaps amid the waves, grasping in hand a sinuous-headed spear to deal the sword-fish death, and here and there, fast as he meets them, slays them, and with blood the waves are reddened. So were Xanthus' streams empurpled by his hands and choked with dead. Yet not without sore loss the Trojans fought, for all this while Pelides' fierce-hearted son of other ranks made havoc. Thetis gazed rejoicing in her son's son, with a joy as great as was her grief for Achilles slain. For a great host beneath his spear were hurled down to the dust, steeds, warriors, slaughter bent. And still he chased, and still he slew. He smote Amides war-renowned, who on his steed bore down on him, but of his horsemanship small profit won. The bright spear pierced him through from navel unto spine, and all his bowels gushed out, and deadly doom laid hold on him, even as he fell beside his horse's feet. Ascanius and Enops next he slew. Under the fifth rib of the one he drove his spear, the other stabbed he beneath the throat, where a wound brings surest doom to man. Whomso he met besides he slew. The names what man could tell of all that by the hands of Neoptolemus died? Never his limbs waxed weary, as some brawny laborer with strong hands toiling in a fruitful field the livelong day, rains down to earth the fruit of olive, swiftly beating with his pole, and with the downfall covers all the ground. So fast fell beneath his hands the thronging foe. Elsewhere did Agamemnon, Tydeus' son, and other chieftains of the Danaans toil with fury in the fight, yet never quailed the mighty men of Troy. With heart and soul they also fought, and ever stayed from flight such as gave back. Yet many heeded not their chiefs, but fled, cowed by the Achaeans' might. Now at last Achilles' strong son marked how fast beside Scamanders' outfall Greeks were perishing. Those Troyward fleeing foes whom he had followed slaying, left he now and bade Automedon thither drive, where hosts were falling of the Achaeans. Straightway he hearkened and scourged the steeds immortal on to that wild fray. Bearing their lord, they flew swiftly over the battle highways paved with death. As Ares' chariot borne to murderous war fares forth, and round his onrush quakes the ground, while on the god's breast clash celestial arms out flashing fire, so charged Achilles' son against Deiphobus. Clouds of dust upsoared about his horse's feet. Automedon marked the Trojan chief and knew him. To his lord straightway he named that hero war-renowned. My king, this is Deiphobus' array, the man who from your father fled in fear. Some god or fiend with courage fills him now. Naught answered Neoptolemus, save to bid drive on the steeds yet faster, that with speed he might avert grim death from perishing friends. But when to each other now full nigh they drew, Deiphobus, despite his battle lust, stayed as a ravening fire stays when it meets water. He marveled, seeing Achilles' steeds and that gigantic son, huge as his father, and his heart wavered, choosing now to flee and now to face that hero, man to man, as when a mountain boar from his young brood chases the jackals. Then a lion leaps from hidden ambush into view. The boar halts in his furious onset, loth to advance, loth to retreat, while foam his jaws about his whetted tusks. So halted Priam's son's car, steeds and car perplexed, while quivered his hands about the lance. Shouted Achilles' son, "Oh, Priam's son, why thus so mad to smite those weaker Argives, who have feared your wrath and fled your onset? So you deem yourself far mightier? If your heart be brave indeed of my spear, now make trial in the strife." On rushed he, as a lion against a stag, borne by the steeds and chariot of his sire. And now full soon his lance had slain his foe, him and his charioteer. But Phoebus poured a dense cloud round him from the viewless heights of heaven, and snatched him from the deadly fray, and set him down in Troy, amid the rout of fleeing Trojans. So did Peleus' son stab but the empty air, and aloud he cried, "Dog, you have escaped my wrath. No might of yours saved you, though never so fain. Some god has cast night's veil over you, and snatched you from your death." Then Cronos' son dispersed that dense dark cloud. Mist-like it thinned and vanished into air. Straightway the plain and all the land were seen. Then far away, about the Scaean gate, he saw the Trojans. Seeming like his sire, he sped against them. They at his coming quailed. As shipmen tremble when a wild wave bears down on their bark, wind heaved until it swings broad, mountain high above them, when the sea is mad with tempest, so as on he came, terror-clad, all those Trojans as a cloak, the while he shouted, cheering on his men, "Here, friends, fill full your hearts with dauntless strength, the strength that well beseems mighty men who thirst to win them glorious victory, to win renown from battle's tumult. Come, brave hearts, now strive we even beyond our strength, till we smite Troy's proud city, till we win our heart's desire. Foul shame it were to abide long deedless here, and strengthless, womanlike, ere I be called war-blencher, let me die." Then unto Ares' work their spirits flamed. Down on the Trojans charged they, yes, and these fought with high courage round their city now, and now from wall and gate towers. Never lulled the rage of war, while Trojan hearts were hot to hurl the foemen back, and the strong Greeks to smite the town. Grim havoc encompassed all. Then, eager for the Trojans' help, swooped down out of Olympus, cloaked about with clouds, the son of Leto. Mighty rushing winds bore him in golden armor clad, and gleamed with lightning splendor of his descent the long highways of air. His quiver clashed, loud rang the welkin, earth re-echoed as he set his tireless feet by Xanthus. Pealed his shout dreadly with courage, filling them of Troy, scaring their foes from biding the red fray. But of all this the mighty shaker of earth was ware. He breathed into the fainting Greeks fierce valor, and the fight waxed murderous through those immortals' clashing wills. Then died hosts numberless on either side. In wrath Apollo thought to smite Achilles' son in the same place where erst he smote his father, but birds of boding screamed to left to stay his mood, and other signs from heaven were sent, yet was his wrath not minded to obey those portents. Swiftly drew Earth-shaker nigh in mist celestial cloaked, about his feet quaked the dark earth as came the sea-king on. Then to stay Phoebus' hand he cried to him, "Refrain your wrath, Achilles' giant son, slay not. Olympus' lord himself shall be wroth for his death, and bitter grief shall light on me and all the sea gods as erstwhile for Achilles' sake. Nay, get back to heights celestial, lest you kindle me to wrath, and so I cleave a sudden chasm in earth and Ilium, and all her walls go down to darkness. Your own soul were vexed thereat." Then, overawed by the brother of his father, and fearing for Troy's fate and for her folk, to heaven went back Apollo, to the sea Poseidon. But the sons of men fought on, and slew, and strife incarnate, gloating, watched. At last, by Calchas' counsel, Achaea's sons drew back to the ships, and put from them the thought of battle, seeing it was not foreordained that Ilium should fall until the might of war, wise Philoctetes, came to aid the Achaean host. This had the prophet learnt from birds of prosperous omen, or had read in hearts of victims. Wise in prophecy lore was he, and like a god knew things to be. Trusting in him, the sons of Atreus stayed a while the war, and unto Lemnos, land of stately mansions, sent they Tydeus' son, and battle-staunch Odysseus over sea. Fast by the fire-god's city sped they on over the broad flood of the Aegean Sea to vine-clad Lemnos, where in far-off days the wives wreaked murderous vengeance on their lords, in fierce wrath, that they gave them not their due, but couched beside the handmaid thralls of Thrace. The captives of their spears, when they laid waste the land of warrior Thracians, then these wives, their hearts with fiery jealousy, fever-filled, murdered in every home with merciless hands their husbands. No compassion would they show to their own wedded lords. Such madness shakes the heart of man or woman when it burns with jealousy's fever, stung by torturing pangs. So with souls filled with desperate hardihood, in one night did they slaughter all their lords, and on a widowed nation rose the sun. To hallowed Lemnos came those heroes too. They marked the rocky cave where lay the son of princely Paeus. Horror came on them when they beheld the hero of their quest groaning with bitter pangs, on the hard earth lying with many feathers round him strewn, and others round his body, rudely sewn into a cloak, a screen from winter's cold. For oft as famine stung him, would he shoot the shaft that missed. No fowl his aim had doomed. Their flesh he ate, their feathers vestured him, and there lay herbs and healing leaves, the which, spread on his deadly wound, assuaged his pangs. Wild, tangled elf locks hung about his head. He seemed a wild beast that has set its foot, prowling by night, upon a hidden trap, and so has been constrained in agony to bite with fierce teeth through the prisoned limb ere it could win back to its cave, and there in hunger and torturing pangs it languishes. So in that wide cave suffering crushed the man, and all his frame was wasted, naught but skin covered his bones. Unwashed there he crouched with famine-haggard cheeks, with sunken eyes, glaring his misery beneath cavernous brows. Never his groaning ceased, for evermore the ulcerous black wound, eating to the bone, festered with thrills of agonizing pain. As when a beetling cliff by seething seas aye buffeted is carved and underscooped for all its stubborn strength by tireless waves, till, scourged by winds and lashed by tempest flails, the sea into deep caves has gnawed its base, so greater beneath his foot grew evermore the festering wound, dealt when the envenomed fangs tore him of that fell water-snake, which men say deals ghastly wounds incurable, when the hot sun has parched it as it crawls over the sands, and so that mightiest man lay faint and wasted with his cureless pain. And from the ulcerous wound aye streamed to earth fetid corruption, fouling all the floor of that wide cave, a marvel to be heard of men unborn. Beside his stony bed lay a long quiver full of arrows, some for hunting, some to smite his foes withal. With deadly venom of that fell water snake were these besmeared. Before it, nigh to his hand, lay the great bow, with curving tips of horn, wrought by the mighty hands of Hercules. Now when that solitary spied these two draw nigh to his cave, he sprang to his bow, he laid the deadly arrow on the string, for now fierce memory of his wrongs awoke against these, who had left him, years agone, in pain groaning upon the desolate seashore. Yes, and his heart's stern will he had swiftly wrought, but even as upon the godlike two he gazed, Athena caused his bitter wrath to melt away. Then drew they nigh to him with looks of sad compassion, and sat down on either hand beside him in the cave, and of his deadly wound and grievous pangs asked, and he told them all his sufferings. And they spoke hope and comfort, and they said, "Your woeful wound, your anguish shall be healed, if you but come with us to Achaea's host, the host that is now sorrowing after you with all its kings. And no man of them all cause of your affliction, but the fates, the cruel ones, whom none that walk the earth escape. But aye, they visit hapless men unseen, and day by day with pitiless hearts now they afflict men, now again exalt to honor, none knows why. For all the woes and all the joys of men do these devise after their pleasure." Hearkening he sat to Odysseus and to godlike Diomedes, and all the hoarded wrath for olden wrongs and all the torturing rage melted away. Straight to the strand, dull thundering, and the ship, laughing for joy, they bore him with his bow. There washed they all his body and that foul wound with sponges, and with plenteous water bathed. So was his soul refreshed. Then hasted they and made meat ready for the famished man, and in the galley supped with him. Then came the balmy night, and sleep slid down on them. Till rose the dawn, they tarried by the strand of sea-girt Lemnos, but with day-spring cast the hawsers loose, and heaved the anchor stories above the deep. Athena sent a breeze blowing behind the galley, taper proud. They strained the sail with either stern sheet taut. Seaward they pointed the stout-girded ship. Over the broad flood she leapt before the wind. Broken to right and left, the sea-dark waves sighed. and seething all around was hoary foam, while thronging dolphins raced on either hand, flashing along the paths of silver sea. Full soon to fish-fraught Hellespont they came, and the far-stretching ships. Glad were the Greeks to see the longed-for faces. Forth the ship with joy they stepped, and Paeus' valiant son on those two heroes leaned, thin-waisted hands, who bore him painfully halting to the shore, staying his weight upon their brawny arms. As seems mid-mountain breaks an oak or pine by strength of the woodcutter half hewn through, which for a little stands on what was left of the smooth trunk by him who hewed thereat hard by the roots, that its slow smouldering wood might yield him pitch. Now like to one in pain it groans in weakness borne down by the wind, yet is upstayed upon its leafy boughs, which from the earth bear up its helpless weight. So by pain unendurable, bowed down, leaned he on those brave heroes, and was borne unto the war host. Men beheld and all compassionated that great archer, crushed by anguish of his hurt. But one drew near, Podalirius, godlike in his power to heal. Swifter than thought he made him whole and sound, for deftly on the wound he spread his salves, calling on his physician father's name, and soon the Achaeans shouted all for joy, all praising with one voice Asclepius' son. Lovingly then they bathed him, and with oil anointed. All his heaviness of cheer and misery vanished by the immortal's will, and glad at heart were all that looked on him, and from affliction he awoke to joy. Over the bloodless face the flush of health glowed, and wretched weakness mighty strength thrilled through him. Goodly and great waxed all his limbs, as when a field of corn revives again, which erst had drooped by rains of ruining storm down-beaten flat, but by warm summer winds requickened. Over the labor land it smiles, so Philoctetes' erstwhile wasted frame was all requickened. In the galley's hold he seemed to have left all cares that crushed his soul. And Atreus' sons beheld him, marveling as one re-risen from the dead. It seemed the work of hands immortal, and indeed so was it verily, as their hearts divined, for it was glorious Trito born that shed stature and grace upon him. Suddenly he seemed as when of old mid-Argive men he stood, before calamity struck him down. Then unto wealthy Agamemnon's tent did all their mightiest men bring Paeus' son, and set him chief in honor at the feast, extolling him. When all with meat and drink were filled, spoke Agamemnon, lord of spears. Dear friend, since by the will of heaven our souls were once perverted, that in sea-girt Lemnos we left you, harbor not your heart within fierce wrath for this. By the blessed gods constrained we did it, and I trow the immortals willed to bring much evil on us, bereft of you, who are of all men skillfullest to quell with shafts of death all foes that face you in fight. For all the tangled paths of human life by land and sea are by the will of fate hid from our eyes. In many and devious tracks are cleft apart, in wandering mazes lost. Along them men by fortune's dooming drift like unto leaves that drive before the wind. Oft on an evil path the good man's feet stumble, the brave finds not a prosperous path, and none of earth-born men can shun the fates, and of his own will none can choose his way. So then does it behoove the wise of heart, though on a troublous track the winds of fate sweep him away to suffer and be strong. Since we are blinded then and erred herein, with rich gifts we will make amends to you hereafter, when we take the stately towers of Troy. But now receive you handmaids 7, fleet steeds 20, victors in chariot race, and tripods 12, wherein your heart may joy through all your days, and always in my tent shall royal honor at the feast be yours. He spoke, and gave the hero those fair gifts. Then answered Pius's mighty-hearted son, Friend, I forgive you freely, and all beside whoso against me haply hath transgressed. I know how good men's minds sometimes can be warped, nor meet it is that one be obdurate ever, and nurse mean rancor's sternest wrath must yield anon unto the melting mood. Now pass we to our rest, for better is sleep than feasting late for him who longs to fight. He spoke, and rose and came to his comrade's tent. Then swiftly for their war-fain king they dight the couch, while laughed their hearts for very joy. Gladly he laid him down to sleep till dawn. So passed the night divine, till flushed the hills in the sun's light, and men awoke to toil. Then all athirst for war, the Argive men again whet the spear smooth-shafted, or the dart or javelin, and they broke the bread of dawn, and foddered all their horses. Then to these spoke Pius's son, with battle-kindling speech, Up! Let us make us ready for the war. Let no man linger mid the galleys ere the glorious walls of Ilium, stately towered, be shattered, and her palaces be burned. Then at his words each heart and spirit glowed. They donned their armor, and they grasped their shields. Forth of the ships in one huge mass they poured, arrayed with bull-hide bucklers, ashen spears, and gallant crested helms. Through all their ranks, shoulder to shoulder, marched they. You had seen no gap between man and man, as on they charged. So close they thronged, so dense was their array. That was Book 9. This is Book 10. Now were the Trojans all without the town of Priam, armor-clad with battle cars and chariot steeds, for still they burnt their dead, and still they feared lest the Achaean men should fall on them. They looked and saw them come with furious speed against the walls. In haste they cast a hurried earth mound over the slain, for greatly trembled they to see their foes. Then in their sore disquiet spoke to them Polydamas, a wise and prudent chief. Friends, unendurably against us now maddens the war. Go to, let us devise how we may find deliverance from our strait. Still bide the Danaans here, still gather strength. Now, therefore, let us man our stately towers, and thence withstand them, fighting night and day until those Danaans weary and return to Sparta, or, renownless, lingering here beside the wall, lose heart. No strength of theirs shall breach the long walls, howsoever they strive, for in the imperishable work of gods weakness is none. Food, drink we shall not lack, for in King Priam's gold-abounding halls is stored abundant food that shall suffice for many more than we, through many years, though thrice so great a host at our desire should gather, eager to maintain our cause. Then chode with him Anchises, his valiant son, Polydamas, wherefore do they call you wise, who bids suffer endless tribulations cooped within walls? Never, how long soever the Achaeans tarry here, will they lose heart, But when they see us skulking from the field, more fiercely will press on. So ours shall be the sufferance, perishing in our native home. It for long season they beleaguer us. No food, if we be pent within our walls, shall Thebe send us, nor Meonia wine, but wretchedly by famine shall we die, though the great wall stands firm. No, though our lot be to escape that evil death and doom, and not by famine miserably die, yet rather let us fight in armor clad for children and grey fathers. Haply Zeus will help us yet, of his high blood are we. Nay, even though we abhorred of him, better straightway to perish gloriously fighting unto the last for fatherland, than die a death of lingering agony. Shouted they all who heard that gallant rede. Swiftly with helms and shields and spears they stood in close array. The eyes of mighty Zeus from heaven beheld the Trojans armed for fight against the Danaans. Then did he awaken courage in these and those, that there might be strain of unflinching fight between host and host. That day Paris was doomed, for Helen's sake fighting, by Philoctetes' hands to die. So to one place strife incarnate drew them all. The fearful battle queen beheld of none, but cloaked in clouds, blood raining. On she stalked, swelling the mighty roar of battle, now rushed through Troy's squadrons, through Achaea's, now panic and fear still waited on her steps to make their father's sister glorious. From small to huge that Fury's stature grew. Her arms of adamant were blood besprent. The deadly lance she brandished reached the sky. Earth quaked beneath her feet. Dread blasts of fire flamed from her mouth. Her voice pealed thunder-like, kindling strong men. Swift closed the fronts of fight, drawn by a dread power to the mighty work. Loud as the shriek of winds that madly blow in early spring when the tall woodland trees put forth their leaves, loud as the roar of fire blazing through sun-scorched brakes, loud as the voice of many waters when the wide sea raves beneath the howling blast, with thunderous crash of waves when shake the fearful shipmen's knees. So thundered earth beneath their charging feet. Strife swooped on them. Foe hurled himself on foe. First did Aeneas of the Danaans slay Harpalion, Erizelus' scion, born in far Boeotia of Amphinome, who came to Troy to help the Argive men with godlike Prothenor. Beneath his waist Aeneas stabbed, and reft sweet life from him. Dead upon him he cast Thersander's son, for the barbed javelin pierced through Hylas' throat, whom Arethusa by Linnaeus bore in Crete. Sore grieved Idomeneus for his fall. By this, Pelides' son had swiftly slain 12 Trojan warriors with his father's spear. First Cebrus fell, Harmon, Pasithius, then Hysymnus, Schedius, and Imbrasius, Phleges, Manassius, Enoemus, Amphinos, Phasis, Galenus last, who had his home by Gargarus' steep. A mighty warrior he among Troy's mighties. With a countless host to Troy he came, for Priam Dardanus' son promised him many gifts and passing fair. Ah, fool, his own doom never he foresaw, whose weird was suddenly to fall in fight ere he bore home King Priam's glorious gifts. Doom the destroyer against the Argives sped valiant Aeneas' friend Eurymenes. Wild courage spurred him on, that he might slay many and then fill death's cup for himself. Man after man he slew like some fierce beast, and foes shrank from the terrible rage that burned on his life's verge, nor reeked of imminent doom. Yes, peerless deeds in that fight had he done, had not his hands grown weary, his spearhead bent utterly, his sword availed him not, snapped at the hilt by fate. Then Meges' dart smote beneath his ribs, blood spurted from his mouth, and in death's agony doom stood at his side. Even as he fell, Epeius' henchmen too, Dilion and Amphion, rushed to strip his armor, but Aeneas, brave and strong, chilled their hot hearts in death beside the dead. As one in latter summer amid the vines kills wasps that dart about his ripening grapes, and so, ere they may taste the fruit, they die, so smote he them, before they could seize the arms. Maenon and Amphinous Tydides slew, both goodly men. Paris slew Hippasus' son, Demoleon, who in Laconia's land beneath the outfall of Eurotas dwelt, the stream deep flowing, and to Troy he came with Menelaus. Under his right breast the shaft of Paris smote him unto death, driving his soul forth like a scattering breath. Teucer slew Zechus, Medon's war-famed son, who dwelt in Phrygia, land of myriad flocks, below that haunted cave of fair-haired nymphs where, as Endymion slept beside his kine, divine Selene watched him from on high and slid from heaven to earth, for passionate love drew down the immortal stainless queen of night, and as a memorial of her couch abides still beneath the oaks, for amid the copses round was poured out milk of kine, and still do men, marveling, behold its whiteness. You would say far off that this was milk indeed, which is a wellspring of white water. If you draw a little closer, though, the stream is fringed as though with ice, for white stone rims it round. Rushed on Alcaeus Meges, Phyleus' son, and drove his spear beneath his fluttering heart. Loosed were the cords of sweet life suddenly, and his sad parents longed in vain to greet that son returning from the woeful war, to Margassus and Phyllis lovely girt, dwellers by lucent streams of Harpasus, who pours the full blood of his clamorous flow into meander, madly rushing. With Glaucus' warrior comrade Scylaicus, Odius' son closed in the fight and stabbed over the shield rim, and the cruel spear passed through his shoulder and drenched his shield with blood. Howbeit he slew him not, whose day of doom awaited him afar, beside the wall of his own city. For when Ilium's towers were brought low by that swift avenging host fleeing the war to Lycia, then he came alone. And when he drew nigh to the town, the thronging women met and questioned him, touching their sons and husbands, and he told how all were dead. They compassed him about and stoned the man with great stones that he died. So had he no joy of his winning home, but the stones muffled up his dying groans, and of the same his ghastly tomb was reared beside Bellerophon's grave and holy place in Tlos, nigh that far-famed Chimera's crag. Yet, though he thus fulfilled his day of doom, as a god afterward men worshipped him by Phoebus' hest, and never his honor fades. Now Paeus' son, the while slew Dioneus and Acamas, Antenor's warrior son. Yes, a great host of strong men laid he low. On, like the war god, through his foes he rushed, or as a river roaring in full flood breaks down long dikes when, maddening round its rocks, down from the mountains swelled by rain it pours an ever-flowing, mightily rushing stream, whose foaming crests over its forelands sweep, so none who saw him even from afar dared meet, renowned Paeus' valiant son, whose breast with battle fury was fulfilled, whose limbs were clad in mighty Hercules' arms of cunning workmanship. For on the belt gleamed bears most grim and savage, jackals fell, and panthers, in whose eyes there seems to lurk a deadly smile. There were fierce-hearted wolves and boars with flashing tusks, and mighty lions all seeming strangely alive. And there, portrayed through all its breadth, were battles, murder rife. With all these marvels covered was the belt, and with yet more the quiver was adorned. There Hermes was, storm-footed son of Zeus, slaying huge Argus nigh to Inachus' streams, Argus whose sentinel eyes in turn took sleep. And there was Phaethon from the sun-car hurled into Eridanus. Earth verily seemed ablaze, and black smoke hovered on the air. There Perseus slew Medusa, Gorgon-eyed by the stars' baths, and utmost bounds of earth, and fountains of deep-flowing ocean, where night in the far west meets the setting sun. There was the Titan Iapetus' great son hung from the beetling crag of Caucasus in bonds of adamant, and the eagles tore his liver unconsumed. He seemed to groan. All these Hephaestus' cunning hands had wrought for Hercules, and these too Philoctetes, most near of friends and dear, he gave to bear. Well, nerds, it seemed too perfect. We're about to get into another big, long battle scene, but we had yet another description of armor. This one was pretty minimal compared to the other two, but I love that we still got a whole description of what was on the belt of Hercules or Heracles. And so, yeah, that was the perfect time to end the episode is what I'm saying, because I just like apparently to end it on describing armor in some way, and also because it's over an hour and my voice is going. I can't believe I forgot about Philoctetes too, and it makes me want to hopefully soon cover the play, which is just called Philoctetes. I think it's Sophocles. It's not my beloved Euripides. That much I know. But the backstory that was like mostly clear kind of in Fall of Troy just there when they introduced Philoctetes is that the story goes that like when they were going to Troy in the first place, so like 10 years earlier, they stopped on Lemnos, and Philoctetes was with them coming to Troy 10 years ago, and they stopped on Lemnos, and he got bit by this water snake, and it was poisonous or venomous, and so they were like, well, you're gonna die, so we'll just leave you here. And I'm pretty sure it's like Odysseus who leads the charge to be like, sorry, dude, we're just assuming you're gonna die, so we're gonna leave you on this island. And then meanwhile, he fucking lives with this like infected foot for a decade. And they go back to get him and they're like, actually, we need you, bro. Glad you're not dead. And then meanwhile, it's like, okay, they take him back to Troy to help, and he's cured of this fucking snake bite within like 30 seconds. And it's like, maybe we could have done this 10 years ago. Like maybe if we were so worried about the snake bite, but like could cure it, you could have done that 10 years ago, and the poor guy wouldn't have spent 10 years with the venomous snake bite, just like waiting and like clearly almost dying of hunger. Like, come on. Anyway, it's another reminder that this and the Iliad are not glorifying war or the Greeks, just broadly. Like, the whole point of all of this is like that everyone is bad in this war. Like, everyone is in the wrong. Everyone commits war crimes, but like, quite frankly, the Greeks commit a heck of a lot more war crimes than the Trojans. Like, let's be honest. But again, like, that is the point. Like, it is not about how one is better than the other, how one is right and one is wrong, or even how anyone deserves to die. It's not about that. This is not a fight between good and evil. It's not a fight against right and wrong. It's literally just a shitty, awful war started for no good reason. And then a bunch of men who can't admit defeat. And so they just stay there for 10 years until they can wait it all out and eventually kill them. But like, come on. Anyway, I can't read these without thinking of that. But also, I'm so thrilled to have had that conversation I did with Joel Christensen a few weeks back, where we looked at, in this case, it was just Odysseus, but just how, but he's not supposed to be a good guy. And I can't wait to have Joel back to talk about the Iliad and how it's not about war being glorious or heroes being these like good guys. It's literally just about how awful war is. Like, anyway, you can all hear my voice going, so we're gonna wrap up. But this was very fun, and I can't wait to get back because, spoilers, Paris is about to die. It's going to be quite a thing. Let's talk about Myths, Baby is written and produced by me, Liv Albert, not this. This was written by Quintus Smyrnaeus and translated by a guy well over 100 years ago, and that's why I have to change so many crazy words. And it still mostly makes sense. Sometimes doesn't. Where was I? Michaela Smith is the Hermes to my Olympians. My assistant producer. Laura Smith is the production assistant and audio engineer. The podcast, select music in this episode was by Luke Chaos. The podcast is part of the iHeart Podcast Network. Listen on Spotify or Apple or wherever you get your podcasts. As much as it is always because I've been like literally talking for 2 hours straight into a microphone, I do kind of enjoy when my voice gets like this at the end, because you'll get proof of why it's stopping. Anyway, thank you all so much for listening. I will be back with more. And I don't know what's coming up next because I'm recording all this before leaving, and this is not coming out until basically right as I get back. So thank you all so much for listening. I'll be back with more cool, nerdy stuff soon. I am Liv, and I do love this shit. Even when the translation is so old, we can all only slightly make sense of it.